You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 11th of October 2024 on Monocle Radio.
It's 22:45 in Kathmandu, 1900 in Oslo, 1800 here in London, and 10 a.m. in Los Angeles. That's the time on Monocle Radio, brought to you by Chanel Watches. Norway's struggles to become the world's greenest oil producer. Why is our future being built by a massive weirdo who jumps up and down behind Donald Trump? And is anybody still impressed by mountaineers? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. It's Friday, so it's our weekly in-house daily, and the Monocle staffers who did not anticipate that the plate of biscuits placed in the studio were some kind of trap are Tom Webb, Gunnar Grunlid and Alex Masouras. They'll discuss the day's stuff, plus we'll meet the South African artist William Kentridge at his new exhibition in Sharjah. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and I am joined today by Monocle Radio's Gunnar Grunlid and Tom Webb, and from our friends at Wink, a couple of floors above us, our business manager Alex Masouras. Hello to you all.
Hello, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
That was almost in unison. Alex, we will start with you because there are exciting times at Wink. Well, when aren't there? But there is a new thing people can look at.
Wink Creative just put out a new thing as of yesterday. Our new website is now live. And for those of you familiar with the agency world, the agency website is a big undertaking because our job is to pay attention to the details, and we're biggest scrutinizers. So getting it right for ourselves is something that gets a lot of eyeballs and a lot of opinions.
How long a process is this? Can you tell us from the beginning of Wink deciding what we really need is a new website to somebody actually going, I think it's all there?
The process, it depends because it gets a little bit broken up sometimes because other things come up whenever you have client projects and other conflicting needs. But we started this process earlier in the summer. So I'd say it took a couple months for us to finally go from what we want to what it looks like to building it and getting it live.
And the URL would be?
www.winkcreative.com.
Tom, you, moving seamlessly along, have not, as far as I know, been building a new website.
No, but I did go to the theatre. I went to the National Theatre.
That's not a gear change at all. Anyway, we're there now.
I looked to you for the gear change, Andrew. I went to see Coriolanus, and it wasn't a 4-hour epic. It was distilled to 2 hours. And on my row was Ian McKellen, who was there because he's the second man to play Coriolanus for the National Theatre, and he was standing and applauding. He absolutely loved it.
Was he relieved that they'd cut out all the dull bits?
I think we all were. It started at 7. We were quite happy to leave at 10.
And Gunnar, helpfully for the purposes of what we are about to discuss, you have in fact been to Norway recently, which is not an unreasonable thing for you to do because you are, of course, Norwegian.
Indeed, yeah, but funny enough, I did go to some places in Norway that I've literally never been before. For example, Bergen, never ever visited. But yeah, I was there to interview various government ministers about Norway's big climate plans.
Our many listeners in Bergen, I'm sure, will want to know what you've had against Bergen until now.
Well, first of all, the dialect, the way they speak over there, it's a lot of and a lot of sort of bit more sort of throatal kind of speaking. The other part is the rain. It is basically the London of Norway, and I have enough of London already, so I just haven't gone.
So your view of the people of Bergen is essentially that they are a morbid breed of damp troglodytes who talk funny. That's what I'm hearing, Gunnar.
Well, but when I went there now, the weather was absolutely beautiful.
Well, there's no digging out of this hole at this point.
It was actually very nice. I can tell you, Bergen listeners, it was actually wonderful when I went, but I'm sure it's miserable usually.
I don't know if that's got you out of the hole into which you were dug, Gunnar. So that not only your first trip to Bergen, we are learning from that, may have coincided with your last, if you know what's good for you. But we are starting in Norway and its ongoing efforts to resolve the contradictions attached to spearheading the transition to green energy while being rich enough to do that because of perching atop a vast lake of oil. Norway released its annual state budget earlier this week, which includes what is known as the Green Book, the part part of the budget focused on climate and nature policies. Gunnar, first of all, what I am imagining whenever a Norwegian Prime Minister announces the country's new budget, you know those scenes of Scrooge McDuck in his vault full of gold coins, just like skiing up and down them or just throwing handfuls of those and cash into the air? That's basically what it's like, right?
Not really, to be honest. I went to the announcement of this Green Book state budget plan, and to be honest, the energy in the room was rather tepid. People weren't particularly excited. There was not a lot of money being thrown around.
Is that just the sort of characteristic Norwegian doerness?
A little bit, but on the other hand, it's also the fact that, you know, you and I have been speaking a lot about Norway's sort of big new milestones in green energy lately. The fact that we have the most electric vehicles on the road in the entire world, this new climate carbon capture facility, which is the first of its kind in the world. But now it's kind of time to put a bit of a damper on things, because now we're actually looking at how is Norway actually doing in reaching its very ambitious climate goals, which includes such things as reducing its emissions by 55% by 2030 and then becoming a complete sort of low emission society by 2050. Now we actually have the data, and it's not actually looking as exciting as it did a few weeks ago.
Because to be clear, the Green Book is not a metaphor or an allegory. It is a literal thing. And listeners, he has one here. He is literally holding it up. If I'm being pedantic, it is green and white. I would estimate the cover it being maybe 3/5 green to 2/5 rather white.
Yeah, I think they could have gone all the way with making it a fully green book. I was a bit disappointed in that myself.
Except, of course, then they may have been worried about the overlap with Colonel Gaddafi's mercifully brief philosophical treatise of the same name, a copy of which I do possess. It's not on me, but I've got one at home.
I think I've seen it around, a few times. Yeah.
What's actually in it? I mean, you could tell us anything. It's all in Norwegian.
So basically, it sort of outlines where Norway's at with reaching its climate goals, what it's planning to do, and it's not looking too good. So the number that I stated earlier, 55% reduction in emissions by 2030, now they've revealed that actually, if things continue as they are now, that's going to look more like 26%, which is less than half of what they originally planned. And what they're sort of proposing is that the way that we're going to get out of this situation is that we're going to use the EU's carbon quota trading system, which is where we can buy these quotas for emissions from other countries that have lower emissions in order to reach our goals. So basically not actually reducing our emissions, but paying to pretend that we have. The problem is that with these quotas, for example, actually we don't know what they're going to cost, and we don't know if there's going to be enough of them. And the rest of the plan, as all of Norway sort of been reacting to this week, there really isn't that much of a concrete plan of like what we're supposed to do. We are still investing very heavily in oil. In fact, this year we broke new records for the most that we've ever invested in any given year, much because of the Russia's invasion to Ukraine. Norway's now become the main supplier of oil to the rest of Europe, and it is trying to cash that in, which seems a bit paradoxical with how it's presenting itself to the world as this big leader in green energy.
Given that we started the show with one absolutely seamless gear change, we're now going to conduct another one, gonna pivoting. Can you pivot with a gear change? Oh, this is a shambles. But anyway, moving from one of your guiding interests, i.e. the green energy transition in Norway, to Japanese anime. There is genuinely sad news on that front. We mark the passing of a legend.
Yes, we do indeed. So it's a very sad day for Japan today. The legendary voice actor Nobuyo Ōyama has passed away at 90 years old. She was beloved in Japan and the rest of the world for voicing the anime character Doraemon, which is a robotic cat from the future who goes back to the past to help a young boy with his childhood problems.
I mean, that's almost a seamless link to one of the topics we will be talking about shortly, but we do have a clip. Was that part of the source of her specific popularity in Norway, in that the robot cat from the future, if indeed that's what that was, does sound strangely like a Scandinavian folk group from the 1970s?
You really do love to compare the Norwegian music to... Yeah, no, I mean, Doraemon wasn't a part of my childhood particularly. Pokemon and Digimon was a lot more. But in Japan, she really was a voice of a generation. This show was the show of a generation in Japan. She voiced the character for over 25 years, over 2,000 episodes. This franchise has made over 7 billion, just to give you an idea of how big of a deal it was. And she was a sort of beloved person also just because she became this amazing voice actor playing, a sort of male character. Because as a child, she was bullied for having a bit of a boy's voice, is what her classmates said at the time. And then her mother gave her the advice that instead of being ashamed of it, you should use it. And that was sort of the thing that propelled her into this amazing career. So she will be missed.
Gunnar Grunlid, thank you for joining us. We will now bring in Tom Webb and Alex Masouras and muse upon Tesla's new Cybercab and the degree to which we would trust our safety to someone who didn't realise that you can make a clown of yourself on Twitter without spending $44 billion. The Cybercab was unveiled at an event in Burbank, and while very nearly as ugly as Tesla's Cybertruck, it does at least have the advantage that, as a robo-taxi, it won't be driven by the kind of people who drive Cybertrucks. Tom, you have been in proper driverless vehicles in San Francisco. Are you a fan?
I have to say, yes, I am a huge fan. It was the Waymo taxi, and this is only operating in places like San Francisco and Texas because of its grid format. It couldn't hit a French roundabout at speed, for example. And it is a very pleasurable ride. It's just as cheap as an Uber or other cab hailing apps. And you can choose everything from the music to the voice. You can sit at the back. And unlike these Tesla Robo cabs, it has a steering wheel. So you can watch it take these big corners with glee. And that was my experience.
Alex, have you had a go in any such conveyance? My only experience of anything like a driverless car has been being in a very rudimentary such thing in Abu Dhabi a few years ago at Masdar City, which really just goes on quite a fixed circuit. But I did think they were pretty cool. They're like little pods, and you just press a button at one of the stops and it arrives and whisks you to the next one.
I don't have the experience of actually being in one myself. My hometown of Pittsburgh was one of the pioneers in the testing of self-driving vehicles. And I remember being on the roads there and seeing them about, and the ugly bit on the top that kind of looks like it should be spinning around and maybe turn into a helicopter. That's the only thing I could observe from the outside that made it look any different. But to be honest, Andrew, I don't really fancy it, so I'm okay not having been in it.
Why do you not fancy it?
I love my cab driver banter.
Really?
Especially whenever
Are you insane?
Oh, I'm American, Andrew.
Well, yeah, tomato. Really, you enjoy the cab driver banter?
Especially whenever you're in a new city. Land in Prague and learn all about the Czech Hockey League and where to go for the coldest Pilsner. And yeah, that's how you get the scoop on a place, what's happening on the ground, you get the real stories.
You're really lucky. I usually learn about how the World Economic Forum is deliberately causing tornadoes.
You get that sometimes too, but that's entertainment value all the same.
Tom, there is, I think, a temptation to which I fear we may already have succumbed in this item, to judge every new Elon Musk associated product by the fact that it is associated with Elon Musk, who is a preposterous buffoon. But are we making a mistake to do that? Because it's not like he's got no idea what he's doing. Clearly running a social network is not his department or his thing. But, he has put people and things into space. He has developed a fairly portable and easily transportable and fireable, uppable internet uplink. He must have some idea what he's doing.
I think so. I think you're saying exactly the right points, because he did make this 20-minute speech, which I listened to, and actually, if you drill down into the detail, it's quite inspiring, the whole idea of getting rid of car parks and replacing them with actually green parks, and the idea that your car is out making money as a taxi while you're at home not using it. I think they're brilliant ideas, and it sounds like a wonderful future, but his ideas are just so catastrophic. He's already being sued about the previous driverless cars that have run people over and have gone too fast, and his deadlines are all over the place. He said it'll be ready by 2026 and then said maybe 2027, and you just don't know. But the vision is there, and I quite like what he's trying to create.
It's not the only new Musk product in which we are being enticed to take an interest, Alex. We have also seen the Optimus robot. Are we enthused by that? A sort of programmable humanoid that will do all the dull stuff we cannot be bothered with, like, for example, looking after our children?
I can't help but to see the Optimus robot and immediately think of the 2004 Will Smith movie I, Robot, and because of that, we're not enthused. We are a little scared. And reading about the event, I guess the Optimus robots were playing rock, paper, scissors, shoot with guests of the event, as well as serving drinks and things like that. So it's getting a bit real and a little bit scary.
Because there is, all technological leaps forward are by their nature disruptive, Tom, and there are winners and there are losers and so forth. But what we're witnessing here is potentially huge, because in the space of one exhibition, we are seeing a vision of an end to driving as a profession or an occupation. So, and that's been such an entry-level job for so many people, whether they're driving taxis, they're driving buses, they're driving trucks. It's very hard to imagine that certainly within the next century, anybody's going to be doing that at all. We also see from the Optimus robot, and this was demonstrated, it can tend bar. There is no reason at all why it couldn't wait tables.
Well, I don't know if this will be the future for so many different reasons, not least Alex, when he said he didn't want to embrace driverless cars. I thought he was going to say because he loves driving, not listening to bloody taxi drivers talk at him. There are people that love driving and will always drive, so we will still see people behind the wheel. And that whole human interaction of babysitting, of looking after dogs, that will always exist. So as terrifying as those robots were, if you see the videos, they were all in lines and they were marching and they were cold. And that's why you mention iRobot. I think the coldness of it means our future cannot simply just have that as our backdrop.
But not hard to imagine, Alex. We are already seeing alarmingly plausible two-dimensional AI representations of humankind. I think it's entirely imaginable that we will see equally plausible 3D representations of humankind. At which point are we still going to think it's cold? Will we stop caring?
Until they can build in human personality, human empathy, and
you're saying human personalities like that's a good thing.
Yeah, I like to think most of them are, at least. But that's the things that make us human can't really be programmed in. So until they can do that, humans are safe.
Take me producing this program, for example. I could never have predicted, even with the finest AI in the world, that Colonel Gaddafi's Green Book would just appear randomly in the top item. I mean, please tell me, that is the joy of human presentation, surely, Andrew.
Okay, so what we've basically taken away from this is that my job is safe.
Well, at least one of us is.
That's a relief. We will move along to a sober reminder of the absurd folly of ever attempting anything. On the slopes of Mount Everest, a foot has been found encased in a boot and a sock on which was sewn a label confirming it as belonging to Sandy Irvine, the British adventurer who attempted to conquer the peak in 1924 alongside George Mallory and was never seen again. Mallory's remains were disinterred in 1999. What has never been completely established, however, is whether Mallory and Irvine perished before or after reaching the summit of Everest. If the latter, they would have been the first by some decades. Alex, I will ask you first, have you ever climbed up a mountain? If not, is it something you do fancy doing at some point?
I've done hiking and rock climbing, but never to the extent of summiting a peak. And to be honest, I consider myself a pretty accomplishment-driven person. I want to run fast and swim and that kind of stuff. But I just don't feel the need to conquer nature like this. I don't know why. There's nothing where I feel like I have to plant my flag and said, I went to this big peak.
I mean, I know why I don't feel that urge, Tom. It's because I don't like heights and I'm bone idle. So there's that. Are you enthralled by the thought. Would you join now? And we've all seen the pictures, I'm sure, just one of those actual queues to get onto the peak of Everest. And it is no small undertaking to get up there. It is not at all risk-free. People do still die trying to do it.
Yeah, no, certainly not. I mean, I am an avid hiker, and my parents are Scottish, so I have hiked many a mountain in Scotland and Ben Nevis. But much to my dismay, particularly in Scotland, when you get to the top, there's no freaking view. It's just clouds and rain and dead reindeer from culling that they do, which they do, by the way, if you're hiking in Scotland. That no one warned me about that. That's not in James Bond.
You're having to trudge through piles of corpses of ruminants.
Honestly, yes, genuinely.
They don't put that on the posters. You are really selling the experience. How much of a schlep is Ben Nevis, though? Because my idea of mountaineering is the highest peak of my own country, which is Mount Kosciuszko in New South Wales, and it is an irony of Australia, this continent of extremes of all kinds. Our highest mountain, you can stroll up it in an afternoon. Like seriously, I'm not exaggerating, you barely break a sweat.
Ben Nevis is pretty significant. You can do it in a day if you set off very, very early, and you can experience 4 seasons in that one day. I thoroughly recommend.
Did you have any kind of sense of accomplishment once you got up to the top? Did you take a little flag with you?
No, I was desperate to get down there.
There is a thing that strikes me, Alex, and I will put this first to you as a fellow non-British person, though, that looking into tales of the, or contemporary reports of the expedition of Mallory and Irvine, and it wasn't Mallory's first attempt to conquer Everest, it was between attempts that he famously snapped back at somebody who asked him why he wanted to climb Everest, because it's there. Often misattributed to Edmund Hillary, who is credited, of course, with the first summiting of Everest. But it was a huge deal when Mallory and Irvine were reported missing and presumed dead. There was a memorial service at St. Paul's. The King, George V, at the time attended it. Are you moved by British tales of heroic failure, or is it a British thing? Would Americans just have written them off as a pair of deadbeats and losers who couldn't even get to the top of a mountain? To hell with them.
Well, perhaps our former president might be touting some sort of line like that, but I find it relatable, and I think a lot of people do. There's something about putting it all on the line, giving it your all at the risk of failure, that whenever you do face that failure becomes a little bit relatable, because you face the fate that a lot of people didn't do what you went off to do because they were scared of it. So I relate to it and I respect it, and I don't think it's just a British thing.
I'll try that a bit on the token Brit at the table, Tom, because there is a thing that I have heard, that the British embrace tales like Scott of the Antarctic, the Light Brigade, many others, as a kind of means of deflecting from the fact that you did spend a good couple of centuries there stomping all over the world, taking people's stuff at gunpoint. And by investing in the heroic failure, this is the Brits' way of reassuring themselves, oh, we're just a bunch of plucky ragamuffins.
I think you're exactly right. And I did some research. There was a book called The Book of Heroic Failures, written by Stephen Powell in 1979.
It's one I treasured my copy as a child. It's wonderful.
Well, more than half of them are indeed British, and I counted them. And we're very self-effacing. My favourite one in that book, you may know him, he's called William McGonagall, forgive me.
The bard, the Scottish bard.
Yes, the Scottish bard. And he's a very serious poet, and he saw himself as a serious poet. He wrote his tribute to the awful Tay rail bridge disaster.
This is a banger.
It is. I will just read the end stanzas for you. And he wanted this to be read out in sort of memorial services. Here we go. Your central girders would not have given way, at least many sensible men do say, had they been supported on each side with buttresses. At least many sensible men confesses. For the stronger we our houses do build, the less chance we have of being killed.
No word of a lie. And in fairness to McGonagall, buttresses is a tough word to rhyme, which is why you see it in so few poems. It may not surprise you to learn, Tom, that I do actually own a complete edition of the collected works of William McGonagall. There's three or four mercifully slender volumes.
I can't believe your lips were moving as I was reading those words out. Yeah,
we have managed to vault from Colonel Gaddafi to William McGonagall in the space of in the space of one daily. Let's see Elon Musk build an android that can do that. Just finally on this, though, Alex, is there any part of you that does... There is a myth or a legend or a hope attached to Mallory and Irvine. They did take cameras with them, which have never been found. I don't know how you would go about developing a film which may have been buried under pack ice for more than a century. But how wild would it be if that camera was found, that film had somehow got developed, and we saw images of them beaming on the top of Everest?
I'm sure Elon Musk is developing the technology to develop that kind of film. But if he's not, I can already imagine the outdoor apparel companies lining up the North Faces and Columbias and Patagonias, because discovery of something like this will just boost the interest in all sorts of outdoor activities. So I'm sure that there's a plot to recover it, and whenever that happens, the marketing will roll, the Netflix specials will roll. People want it to happen. So hopefully it gets uncovered and we get some exciting climbing videos.
Alex Masouras and Tom Webb, also Gunnar Gronlid, thank you for joining us on today's Daily. Now, in Istanbul, this year's instalment of Monocle's annual Quality of Life conference is steeling itself for the closing night party. Let's cross over live to Monocle's head of radio, Tom Edwards, who is joined by Monocle's chairman, Tyler Brûlé, and editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Yes, I'm here with Tyler Brûlé and Andrew Tuck. Grab the gentlemen before they dash off to what's going to be a very exciting dinner. But we've just got a moment, chaps, to reflect on another incredible day at the Quality of Life Conference 2024 edition. Tyler, you've been a busy man today. Did you have a moment to take stock and jot down a couple of key takeaways?
Well, I did, but also there's just that moment of also you're prepping for the other panels. You've got sort of one ear to what's happening on stage. But I think one of the best moments, one of the highlight moments, I think was the triple act on stage. But Andrew and I talking to our gentleman who, of course, was focused on the industry in this country of hair replacement.
So yeah, we had Mehmet Erdogan on stage, who a doctor who runs this hair transplant service. He's doing 5,000 men a year, not just himself. He has a team, of course, 150 staff in total.
Drivers included.
And, people come here with bald pates and they go home with the potential for bushy futures. It's amazing.
Well, and definitely bushy futures, because, we were, of course, Andrew sort of led with a question about, of course, if you don't have enough, hair above your ears or elsewhere, where do you go? And we just kept on moving south.
Yes, it turns out that you may get very curly hair.
Tyler, you kept on interrogating us. I don't know why. One question: when he left the stage, was parting difficult?
Oh.
Huh?
I don't know.
Now, listen, Tyler, of course, we had lots of fun, and Dr. Mehmet was absolutely top drawer. But, we got into some pretty thorny stuff, some pretty heavy stuff as well, because quality of life is also about feeling secure. I loved the conversation you had with Glenn Korn. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, Glenn Korn, an ex-CIA operations officer, has been based all over the world, now in Washington. And it was just a very open conversation because, I said, of course, we know what he does, and we played the little scenario. If I was sitting beside you on the plane in your former career, what would you say you did? And he's like, well, I was a diplomat. And of course, many of us know those types of diplomats. He's like, what do you do at the embassy? Well, I'm just, I'm at the embassy. I'm on one of the desks at the embassy. And then you really know that someone is working in intelligence. But he was fantastic. We kept that panel very, very short because people just wanted to ask him questions. And we, of course, covered the topic about instability, potentially around the U.S. election. We talked about what is going to happen in Iran. I think he was fascinating on this. Of course, we've not seen a strike back from Israel at this point, but he was also talking about this could really be regime change. So this is not just about a strike against Tehran and other important positions, but this could really mean the downfall and also who else is going to pile in at that point as well.
A very thoughtful and considerate man, and he sort of apologised to the delegates for threatening to ruin their weekend, because he said, look, the world's a dangerous place. But Andrew, what I was really impressed by throughout the day, actually, relentlessly upbeat, people who know Monocle well and the kind of writing that you guys do, what we talk about on the radio, we're looking for avenues of opportunity. We always talk about benchmarks of excellence. So many to talk about today. Any that jumped out or any that surprised you, perhaps?
Again, I think that you're talking about the risky world, but we had at the beginning of the day a panel included the Swiss ambassador to Turkey, and he was saying look, actually, there are ways of negotiating peace deals, of bringing about mediation. What you have to do is end up speaking to people who you really don't like. And he said a really good phrase. He said, you don't make peace deals with your friends. You have to speak to your enemies. And I thought that pragmatism from him was interesting. And I think also the theme came up a few times about needing more people at the table. And he was good. He said, look, often it's a bunch of guys who end up doing these deals. We see they have more stickiness, more chances of surviving if you also have a number of women at the table as well. Let's make these conversations happen. So I don't know. There's lots of really positive stuff around it.
I can hear a bit of a bass line somewhere.
I can as well. Listen, we saw our DJ, Andrew, speaking of Switzerland, DJ Pitch is here this evening. You said, of course, we're going to be scampering off. I believe we might be actually doing it on the high seas, or at least down the Bosphorus anyway.
Yes, we're going to be heading down the water, down the Bosphorus to the next venue.
Is it down or is it up? If you're heading towards the black...
Oh, no, you're right up.
It's up, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think, John? It is up, isn't it?
See, I told you we'd get into the thorny issues of the day. One question, Tyler, and again, I don't want to throw things forward while we're still just sort of basking in the glory of today. But it cropped up again and again. People want to know, how do I lobby for my city to host the conference next year? Yeah, there were some allusions. There was some Iberian chat. Can you offer any big scoops here on the Daily about where we might be headed in 25?
Well, you said the Iberian Peninsula. It's not a done deal yet, but it is certainly. It's a city on the Med. We can say that much. And that still gives you. It could be Malaga, right? Could be Barcelona. Could be Valencia.
You had some nice pictures of Malaga today, I saw.
No, that was Marbella, in fact. Down the way you have to fly into Malaga to get to Marbella. Yeah, it could be any of those places. I mean, actually, well, I will say we're not going to Palma. I mean, that could be part, but it could be part of the sort of the patrons after moment, Andrew.
I'm always keen for Palma, but what's a trick that people are missing is that actually in the room is a representative of the city that we may go to. So if only just like with Glenn, if they ask the right questions, they could out what the next city is.
So you've got to keep your eyes open and your ear to the
Absolutely.
ground. Gents, thanks so much for wrapping up the day.
Thanks,
I don't want to hold you back. Outfit change, off to the big party.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take to the high seas. It's been great fun. Enjoying the day with you and all the rest of the Monocle team. Andrew Muller and the team back in London, just a little snapshot of what we've been up to, but I've got to get my party shoes on, so that's all from us for now.
Tom, Tyler and Andrew, thank you all for joining us from Istanbul. Finally, on today's show, William Kentridge has been making drawing, sculpture, performance, live opera and theatre for decades. His work deals mostly with apartheid in his native South Africa and the fallout of colonialism and colonial ideologies. He's shown his work at the Royal Academy in London and currently has an exhibition at the Luma Foundation in Arles. Art writer Amarose Adams caught up with him at his exhibition A Shadow of a Shadow at the Sharjah Art Foundation in the United Arab Emirates. Amarose began by asking him to explain the focus and themes of his new exhibition.
It is the first exhibition that's focused on the theatre and performance pieces so strongly. Going back from 1984, I think, is the earliest one, which is 40 years of different performances. Even earlier, if one thinks of the Ubu as a theme. It's strange, it's a mixture of thinking, this one we really didn't need to look at, and other times thinking, gosh, that young man there, he knew what he was doing. Or more often, how lucky he was not to have known what he was doing, so everything was possible. Because once something's been done, it's very hard to imagine yourself not knowing that technique, that approach, that image.
Is there anything that stood out to you particularly, looking at the work in that way?
I suppose the procession is an ongoing theme that's gone through work for a long time. It's interesting how almost, not all the projects, but most of them have quite a specific historic reference built into them at some point. So I hadn't thought of them as history plays. But going from Sophia Town, the earliest piece here, even the Ubu piece is completely connected to events in mainly South African and other colonial history. A couple of the operas are less directly connected, but usually it's something that comes out of them that finds a link again.
And I was thinking about theatre and your work when I was preparing for this interview and doing a little bit of reading, and it seems to me that it's just such a passion for you, the theatre. Like, you seem to take on lots of different varieties of theatre, from these huge commissioned opera projects to local theatre. where you live, and I wondered what it is about theatre that offers you a way in.
What theatre offers, even though this is an exhibition about theatre productions, almost all of these productions have their origin in drawing, in many months of drawing. So you have in a big-scale opera 6 weeks of rehearsal, say, at the end, but there's maybe been 18 months of preparation, of drawings, of animation, of editing, that goes on. So in that sense, it's quite linked to a studio practice, not just a rehearsal room practice. But there's a balance between the pleasures of being on one's own in the studio, just working, making, drawing, sculpture, and the pleasure of collaboration, of the energy that comes from working with many people around you. And I try to keep that balance between months when I'm on my own and months when it's pleasure of being on your own after months of collaboration, and the energy of collaboration after months on your own. In the last couple of years, it's tilted more towards a lot of different collaborators being around. But I know I want to carve out more space just to be drawing on my own.
And that rhythm is something that's gone on throughout your practice?
The rhythm's gone on throughout my practice. When I was at high school, I was doing both theatre in school and drawing in an art school in the evening. At university, I was both with amateur theatre groups or student theatre groups and working at an art school in the evenings and afternoons. Then I tried for a while to say, no, I need to do one or the other. So I stopped drawing and went to theatre school in Paris, where I discovered I should not be an actor very quickly, but learnt a lot about performance and the gesture and the body and movement, and came back, but discovered, in fact, then I was, after a while, back in the studio making drawings, and then the drawings became animations, and the animations came into theatre, and then I gave up trying to predict what the work would be.
And that must be something so liberating in a way, like letting go of predicting what the outcome will be of a work.
Both liberating in the sense of letting the work lead the way, but also even as someone, for example, making drawings, there are many images that have emerged from the demands of the narrative of theatre play that I would not have arrived at if I was simply making drawings in the studio. And there are many things that happen as drawings which give the impulse and lead a way into thinking of a theatre performance. So they feed each other in a very immediate and direct way. The forms, the language of and the way of working. Both of them are very physical. I mean, whether you're demonstrating or working with actors in large-scale movements or just the movement of your arm and body making a drawing, it's very much an acknowledgement of the body in thinking.
One thing which I think people sometimes, if they don't know your work so well, they consider it a heavy practice that you have, and you do deal with some gargantuan topics. But one thing I think that you see when you look and study your performance and your theatre work is your love of humour and how funny your work can be, and your kind of work with the absurd. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on why the absurd is such a useful tool to tackle these gargantuan subjects with.
If I take the South African example, I lived the first half of my life under apartheid.
Yes.
And if you think of the laws that were enacted, deciding who should be considered white, who should be considered black, who should be considered Asian, who should be considered other Asian, that Japanese were honorary white, that there was a separate category, and how would you determine who you were? Would a pencil stick in your hair? I mean, the rules and the practices were both evil and absurd. Absurd in the sense that it was about a logic that had gone awry, but this bad logic then followed through to the nth degree. And so there was a way in which the category of the absurd, where conventional rational logic is twisted and broken, is a way of describing the world. It's not just a joke, it's not just a humor, it's actually, in some ways, alerts us to these crazy paradoxes and contradictions which arise from these political actions.
And I feel that theatre tackles that so well.
Well, theatre can tackle it, in a very direct way. Theatre, as opposed to an exhibition, people essentially watch on their own. You go through at your own pace. Even if you're going with someone, very often you separate and then rejoin and then say, come and look at this picture. So there is something of a communal looking, but essentially it's a solitary activity. In the theatre, it's very much about gathering, or the opera house gathering 300, 500, 1,000 people together and knowing all their views are going to the same object and all the different sets of associations are. And there's a comfort and a deep humanity in that collaborative looking. that theatre has, that performance has.
That was Amma Rose Adams speaking with the artist William Kentridge. His exhibition at the Sharjah Art Foundation, indeed, will be running until the 8th of December. That is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Gunnar Grunlid, Tom Webb, Alex Masouras, and also everybody at the Quality of Life Conference in Istanbul. Today's show was produced by Tom Webb and researched by George Ruskin. Our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening.